Okay folks, let's cut to the chase. It's already September in 2021, and here is our ongoing situation. Since March of last year, we have been enduring a global pandemic that has not yet ceased. It all started with a novel virus known as COVID-19, believed to begin disbursement around the Wuhan region of China around December 2019, likely due to interspecies transmission via either bats or pangolins. Fast forward into mid-March of 2020, when shelter-in-place began in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as an eventual activation for a color T reassignment system throughout the state of California, restricting what may or may not be considered safe practices or guidelines for certain businesses to operate under. All of this was going on under the previous administration, when science was essentially thrown out the window, yet we still were somehow immersed in Operation Warp Speed for trying to create new vaccines that would fit just right. Before any vaccines were officially released, former President Trump himself was infected with COVID-19 and was taken to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. By the time the 46th President of the United States was elected with 306 electoral votes and a whopping 81.3 million popular vote count, Trump would become the first single-termer since the first Bush. Although he still refutes it to this day. Such horrific stunts as the January 6th insurrection are unforgettable fiascos that can only ricochet the further amplitude of this still belligerent barbarity. Now Biden, VP Kamala Harris, Press Secretary Jen Psaki and others are helping to guide the American people through the first half of 2021 in what has offered American citizens a great first run at 3 essentially free vaccines: Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. Both the Pfizer and Moderna brands each require 2 doses, while the Johnson & Johnson claims to be capable of fulfilling with a single shot. These vaccines are government paid for, so they do not require payment on site. Thus, citizens will not need to pay while getting their vaccines, as they have technically been paid for already with citizens' taxes. Before the vaccines existed, masks were an absolute priority. Once vaccines started to get distributed, it was thought that citizens would gladly take them, considering that the consequences of not taking vaccines up to that point, elderly or otherwise, was hospitalization, or even death. By the halfway point of the year, or around July 4, 2021, there was a goalpost desired of 70% that Americans came close to reaching, but did not quite achieve. This was due in large part because of misinformation. So clarifying any of that is the goal for the remainder of this video. First and foremost, it is important to understand how tiny these viruses actually are. They are entirely invisible to the naked eye, and upon investigation, scientists using an electron microscope found SARS-CoV-2 particles to be ranging in diameter between 50 nanometers to 140 nanometers. When compared to dust mites and other items that might be encountered a bit more frequently, such items as the dust mite, while still microscopic, are also approximately 2,000 times larger than COVID-19. This makes specific masks like the N95 recommended, because they are so well made, as compared to just simple cloth material, or a bandana, although certainly better than nothing. Neither have as intricately woven a fabric-threaded blockade pattern. Some believe that the coronavirus and its later variants may just wait it out and attack whenever it feels like it. This is not accurate. If there is an environment where the virus still exists, in which persons neither have been vaccinated, nor are wearing any format of a mask upon both their nose and mouth, then the likelihood of them catching COVID goes way up. The concept of herd immunity was introduced because it was once thought enough people might actually try to participate and get humanity back under control of the global viral outbreak. Because of certain misinformation being spread around certain news outlets that also like to promote freedom of speech, it does not help keep the masses informed on the latest scientific updates. Nor will it permit the public to truly reach the conceptualized herd immunity. All the while more variants ironically get released due to the defiance of those that try to practice their freedom of speech. The nature of these tiny viruses themselves are not very complex at all. So long as there is no mask nor no vaccine that is not developed for that particular variant, it is going to continue to proceed to invade and reproduce. Those that at least use a mask and/or have taken the vaccine have done a great job in attempting to protect themselves, and hopefully others as well, for the promoting of the greater good. There still by this date seem to be a large quantity of folks that are resistant to the concept of wanting to get the vaccine at all, whether it's political, or a health risk, or an uncertainty for long-term side effects, or not knowing reproductive health risks post-vaccine, or perhaps something else unstated. The Delta variant itself is thought to have started in India, and dominant strains have traveled from there to Great Britain as well before really taking off. There is also a Gamma strain identified in Brazil, and the Lambda afterward. The Delta variants are certainly more contagious than other previous strains, particularly to the unvaccinated crowd. It's affected even children more than prior strains did, with hyperlocal outbreaks possible. The CDC recommends taking any of the 3 vaccines offered in America, without underlying health restrictions. Of those vaccines requiring multiple injections, minor side effects could be experienced, including tiredness, headache, muscle pain, and fever. More people tended to experience said side effects after the second dose than after the first dose, although anyone potentially about to get vaccinated could experience certain side effects after either dose. Some of these underlying health restrictions may include autoimmune disease itself, including such versions as Hashimoto's thyroiditis, for which certain vaccines may be able to trigger on a case-by-case basis, perhaps with more extreme side effects. Regarding pregnancy and deciding whether to still get vaccinated, there is a Harvard study regarding specifically the immunogenicity of COVID-19 mRNA vaccines in pregnant and lactating women. Between April of 2020 and March 2021, there was a sample of 103 women who received a COVID-19 mRNA, 30 of whom were pregnant and 16 of whom were lactating. Immunogenicity was demonstrated in all samples, especially as any having taken the vaccine produced antibodies within both their breast milk and new infant blood cord, which is already umbilical. This news is very promising, and is already like one less thing for pregnant mothers to worry about for bringing new baby children into this world, like chicken pox. Also good to take note of is that the mRNA vaccine will not actually change your physical DNA itself. No mutation shall take place within the body. They purely are about delivering necessary information, which the vaccines instruct bodily cells how to create proteins capable of triggering an appropriate immune response. Last year, pre-vaccine rollout, far too many people needed to die due to COVID. Our current CDC COVID total death count is at 634,157. The day before the Biden administration began, it already stood at 400,000, and then, not even a month into the Biden term, on February 22, 2021, we reached 500,000 deaths, which means more Americans have died from COVID-19 than did on the battlefields of World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War combined. There are so many other countries beyond the United States that are not as lucky from the perspective of not having decent access to vaccines, let alone necessarily the same RNA ones offered. Could also be adenovirus vector vaccines, such as Oxford AstraZeneca or Janssen, then inactivated virus vaccines, such as Sinopharm or CoronaVac, or even subunit vaccines, such as ApiVac Corona or ZF 2001. The maps just shown display their entire global rollout. Depending on the destination, certain countries have a specific level number applied that defines how elevated their current travel restrictions are, and they are as follows. Level 1, such as Grenada, is exercise normal precaution. Level 2, such as Kosovo, is exercise increased caution. Level 3, such as Italy, is reconsider travel. Level 4, such as Iceland, is do not travel. The United States planned to share at least 80 million doses of certain vaccines to COVAX, CARICOM, and our closest neighbors. It is important to note that just in the past month, from July to August of 2021, inside the US, the Delta variant has catapulted into the spotlight. It is also important to note how good or not so good certain vaccines seem to be working on the Delta variant specifically. According to one Minnesotan study, in which only 25,000 fully vaxxed recipients were studied by the Mayo Clinic, The Delta variant capabilities for Pfizer-BioNTech brand dropped to become just 42% effective, while the Moderna brand stayed much higher at approximately 76%. Further studies are deserved for more accurate results across a wider spectrum with more participants. One brilliant man absolutely needing recognition for his many decades amidst COVID vaccines, and countless other studies, AIDS included, is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He has been on board serving the public health sector since the Reagan administration, became director of the National Institute of Health in 1984, and eventually immunologist and chief medical advisor to the president. Many accolades were earned by Fauci under both parties of U.S. presidents, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President George W. Bush in 2008 for his work on the AIDS program, PEPFAR. The only president who spoke off the cuff, and continues to dare to speak that way, was Trump, about all sorts of ungrounded misleading items, ranging from the bleachified hydroxychloroquine to an endless pyramid of bottomless Pinocchios about faux accomplishments that he never actually made, to flat-out false economic achievements, and of course the multiple impeachments, the Mueller investigation, the insurrection, and much more. May I remind you that the MAGA slogan was actually created by Reagan? Of course. We all knew how Trump stood regarding white supremacy, surely elected in backlash to Obama, although never ever personally winning the popular vote during any occurrence. So, where does this take us? Are we at a standstill? If governors in such states as Florida and Texas are not mandating masking, with skyrocketing rates during the Delta virus variant, perhaps even punishing elementary superintendents and staff members for attempted mask enforcements to protect our own children, how is our country going to help generate a force field of herd immunity? We don't seem to have enough percentage of the population that want to participate in logical groupthink. It cannot be achieved just by praying it away, as stuffing humans into packed mega churches simply creates situations with folks much less than 6 feet apart, assumedly without masks, etc. Additionally, our current era is not one that had as much so-called faith in science as some generations prior, where now there are some with much distrust in it, sadly preferring catered to religions which often regard some form of omnipotent invisible being to worship, all the while many televangelists truly know how to capitalize off of this. One good idea, considering that history repeats itself, might be to look back at the 1918 influenza pandemic, also known as the Spanish flu, starting around the state of Kansas, then rapidly spreading onto other regions including France, Germany, and the UK. The timing, of course, was terribly aligned with the end of World War I, and infected a good chunk of everybody involved. Death count range estimates approximately from 20 million to 50 million, perhaps even a more broad range from a conservative low of 17 million to a high peak of 100 million deaths, all still separate from the actual World War I, making it one of the most deadly pandemics of all time. So then how did people ultimately survive? Well, considering the time frame, the concept of antiviral drugs did not yet exist, let alone antibiotics for secondary bacterial infections. So doctors relied heavily on other random assortments of medicines and treatments for varying degrees of effectiveness from the previous century, including, but not limited to, aspirin, quinine, strychnine, iodine, bloodletting, and Ayurveda. The Spanish flu mostly perished young adults. In the first few years, 99% of pandemic deaths in America were in folks 65 and younger, and of those, half of them were between 20 and 40 years of age. There was also some misinformation and wartime censorship. Plus, because this event overlapped with the bigger World War I, a lot of it gets forgotten about. No, the Spanish flu wasn't the Black Death of the 1300s, but nor is COVID-19. We do, here in the year 2021, have multiple technologically advanced vaccines that were impossible to create during the time of the Spanish flu, and folks back then probably would have been lining up in droves to take the shots if it meant their survival. Now, we in America have people literally choosing death instead of a vaccine, when other nations don't necessarily even have the option to get to take a vaccine yet. Doesn't herd immunity sound appealing if your body doesn't have preventative health restrictions? What do you think Biden would do? What would you personally do? Thank you for listening. Be sure to click subscribe. This episode was not sponsored in any way by the meowing cats in the yard, nor the wild parrots of Telegraph Hill.